Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Ex Post Watcho, your favorite movie retrospective podcast. Each week, we pick a movie that one of us has seen, maybe the other hasn't, and we go back and watch it and see if it holds up or we like it or all that stuff. This week, we're going to watch Slapshot from 1977, a movie starring Paul Newman and the sport of hockey. Ilana, have you ever seen Slapshot?
I think that I have, but it was probably over 20 years ago. So I really don't remember much. I'm a big Paul Newman fan. I'm a true Canadian. I enjoy a hockey game. I enjoy the game and the politics of it and the behind the scenes views of what goes on. So I think I'm going to enjoy this. But I don't really have much that I can say or that I'm expecting. I really don't remember much at all about this movie.
I'm predicting that you'll like parts of it, and I think there's a lot of stuff you're not going to like. I'm sort of perhaps subjecting you to this movie to a degree. It's from the 70s, and it's perhaps a movie for the boys in a lot of ways, although it was written by a woman. So you can't get mad at any of the dialogue in this movie. It's her fault. But it's a great Paul Newman performance. I think he kind of is he's sort of like a bit of a scoundrel, but also kind of lovable at the same time, which I think he pulls off really well.
He does that well.
Yeah. And, I remember when I was a kid, we're Canadian. We all love hockey, or, most people do. Hockey's a big part of Canadian life. So a lot of, kids really like this movie, and I didn't see it until I was like a bit older. And I was kind of surprised because like as a hockey movie, it's fine. I mean, it's a hockey movie and there's a lot of hockey in it, but really it's like, that's kind of not what the movie is about in a lot of ways. I don't think that's the most interesting part, even though it is enjoyable to sort of like watch this throwback 70s style hockey taking place. Really, the movie is like, it's about this is established in the first few minutes, but it's a working class town with the plant in it, and the plant is getting shut down, and everything kind of goes from there. So what is this minor league hockey team that is not bringing in a lot of people to begin with? What are they going to do now that the one business in town is gone? Which is like, it's a 70s movie, and that's kind of really what it is like, it's the story of deindustrialization in America and its consequences. So I find that aspect of it very interesting, and that's kind of like what people are trying to figure out throughout the movie. So I think it's a good time. I actually watched this a couple weeks ago because I was like thinking about if this would be a good one to cover, and I wanted to really remember some scenes and dialogue and just like make sure this would be a good choice. I'm interested to see your reactions to it.
I have seen it, and I don't remember being highly offended by it. So it was a long time ago, though. Have much stronger opinions now, but I mean, I can also watch a movie in the context of when it was made.
Yeah, you're definitely going to need to do that.
Yeah.
All right, let's go watch Slapshot, and we'll be back in a minute. It's all right. It's coming on. We got to get right back to where we started from. Love is good. Love can be strong. We got to get right back to where we started from. We're back from watching Slapshot and listening to that song multiple times. Ilana, what did you think of Slapshot?
Yeah, Slapshot I enjoyed it for the most part. Like I like the story. I like the concept for the movie. It took a little while to dig into the actual plot. Like the first 45 minutes or so were a bit of a slog, but I don't know. I like the characters. I think Reggie's a great protagonist. You kind of hate him, but he's also really lovable. I don't know. I felt really homesick watching this movie. I was sort of like, take me back to small town Alberta and let me sit in the the risers in some shitty community arena. So there were things I really were very felt very comfortable and very much like home about this. I know that in the first part of this recording, before we watched the film, you were like, I don't know if you're gonna love everything. But I really wasn't as offended as I expected to be, just because I feel like I know all these guys. I feel like we grew up with guys like this. I have cousins who played hockey, so I feel like this is sort of like a product of the times. Obviously, some very problematic stuff viewed through a 2021 lens, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fun movie. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed watching it. How about you?
I disagree. This movie is perfect. No, it's not. But it's really good. I said in the intro the first time I watched it, I was a bit thrown off because I was like expecting a hockey movie, which it is. But I was like, what is all this weird like relationship stuff that's going on? Like, there's just a lot of time spent with like characters, and that is what I really like about it now. Like, the hockey stuff is fun, but I just really like the characters and the sort of overall plot that's going on there. Every time I watch this movie, I like it more. It's very Canadian in a lot of ways. Like, the movie takes place in the States, but there's references to Canada, to Canadian places, and there's French Canadian characters, which are certainly something I can identify with.
Those French Canadian characters were my favorite characters.
They all sound like my dad.
Killed me. Yeah.
But also, like, hockey is this sort of like weird unifying thing between Canada and the US, where in terms of hockey, I sort of consider like the northern US part of Canada. Like, it all kind of feels like it's the same thing. And it's a funny movie. Like, a lot of my notes for this were just like lines of dialogue, which, in abstract aren't necessarily funny, but it's just like the delivery of them is great. And the performances are good. And it's just a really fun time. Has some dynamite 70s fashion in it too. That's something I didn't sell you at in the intro, but as I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, Ilana's going to dig these outfits.
The outfits, the hair, fantastic.
A lot of leather, plaid.
It's big ass glasses, a lot of feathered hair, high-waisted pants. It's great.
So the movie opens off with a little TV program, and we meet Denis Lemieux, the goalie, and he's doing an interview with a TV guy. I love this opening scene. It's just so fun. He's explaining the rules of hockey. I love Denny. He's like adorable. Like, he's just such a like funny character. He's got so many good lines. I just love when he's talking about like, my allergies to these fucking people.
The way he describes hockey to this guy interviewing him is so good, and the guy's reactions are perfection.
Yeah, you go to the box, you feel shame, but then you get free. I like at the end of that TV segment, the TV guy just goes, I think that went very well. Because that's literally the end of every recording we do. I just go to you, I'm like, I think that went really well. 90% of the time. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
And we've got a hockey team in the town of Charleston, which is made up. So this was based on the writing of Nancy Dowd, who had a brother who played in a minor league in a team in Pennsylvania. From what I read, it sounds like this is actually like pretty... I'm sure it's a little fantastical in some places, but like overall, it's very much inspired by the story of like a team that went under. Their uniforms almost look the same. It's like the same color pattern. Cool. So it's a minor league team in a working class town. They get booed. People yell at them because they suck. And they get the bad news that the mill is closing down, and they're just trying to figure out what to do with themselves.
Yeah, I was expecting the mill to have more of an effect on this story. Like, we hear about it a few times, but it seems somewhat inconsequential to the overall plot. I mean, I know it's important at the end of the day. We don't really hear that much about it. I mean...
Yeah,
I kind
it's
of
not
about it.
The mill in particular. I mean, just the mill is closing means that 10,000 people are going to be out of work, which means the team is boned. So like, you don't hear much about the mill specifically, but that is like the reason why this, the rest of the plot happens, which is the team is going under and Reggie Dunlop has to like figure out what to do.
Yeah, I just mean they mentioned the mill at the beginning, and I think we get a shot of it, 2/3 of the way in, and otherwise it's kind of Reggie's story.
Yeah, and it's the story of Reggie Dunlop. He is the player coach, which I did some research. The last time that happened in the NHL was like 1970 or something like that. That's such a crazy idea today that you would have a player who is the coach, and especially like he looks like he's maybe in his early 50s or something like that.
That threw me off at first. Actually, one of my notes until I heard the term player coach was, what is the fucking age range of this, team, or what the fuck do they call it? Like league. Thank you. That's what it's called. I was really confused until they let us know that he's a player coach.
Yeah, I mean, there is no technical upper limit in sports leagues, as far as I know, of how old you can be. It's usually just dictated by how long can you keep playing.
Yeah.
I think like in the NHL today, like if you are, usually like mid to late 30s is like you're an old guy. There's like a few exceptions. I think there's like one dude right now in his early 40s.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing to think about that and be like, oh, if I were a famous athlete, I would be retired right now.
As anything with your body, a dancer, once they hit 30, they're over that hill already.
Yeah. That's another thing about this movie that is sort of like interesting is the version of hockey it shows. Like you can kind of draw a line. I don't know. I'm gonna just say like the late 80s, early 90s. I'm probably wrong about that, but like there is a point where like hockey just starts to like look different. There's stuff like everybody gets helmets and like better equipment and stuff like that. But the game got a lot like faster. Players didn't smoke cigarettes all the time anymore. You look at a player like Sidney Crosby today, like that's someone who from birth, was grown in a vat to be a hockey player and it's like the guy from the video game Halo where they like take them as kids and train them to be super soldiers. They just do that with hockey now and like all sports. Whereas back in the day, things were a bit more free and loose. Also, goalies just used to be terrible. Like goaltending prior to 1980 or 1990 looks ridiculous. It's just a guy standing there and then someone fires a puck and he just like flops his arm and lands on the ground.
Don't insult my friend Denis. I did think this was interesting, though, because I did a bit of research about hockey and what it looked like over the years, because I don't really know. I mean, hockey's always been on for me, but I've never got like super, super intense into hockey. But everything that I've read is sort of like in the 70s when this movie was made is when those shifts really started to happen. Like helmets became important in the game, which seems insane that they weren't before, but I guess it's like a seatbelt thing. And everything became sort of bigger and faster and looked more like it does today. I mean, obviously that was still at such a different time, but I also think like minor leagues and major leagues, they play so differently. Like I almost prefer watching like minor league games because they're faster. They're less like, I feel like they're working for it, because those NHL guys are like, obviously they have to work, but like they got a few million. They could be done and they're fine. I don't know. I feel like maybe they become jaded or something. So watching like even like a minor league game, it's a little grittier. So it's a little more fun. It looks maybe more like hockey used to look.
It depends.
Not as polished.
I think it depends what kind of minor league it is. So you'll notice a big difference between junior hockey and like NHL hockey. So like, junior is like the younger kids, they play in the junior league for a few years. And I find those games, I actually don't like that kind of hockey as much. It is more like you will see more fights. And people do have things to prove, like they're trying to get drafted,
right?
So like they really want to show off. But I find it's like the thing about the NHL is that the players at that level have like patience. So it sometimes will look really slow when you're watching them like cycle the puck around. You're like, what are they doing? Whereas with the kids, they're just like, like they're all like running at 10, cranked up on Red Bull, like freaking out the whole time. So it's a very different sport. I remember once watching one of the junior tournament games, and then immediately after it was an NHL game, and I was just like watching the NHL game, like, this is so slow and boring.
Yeah. Look, those guys, some of them in their early 30s already. They can't be expected to keep up with those 19-year-olds.
They got their walker out there.
Also, I got to say this too. I'll talk more about the movie now. The ice in these shots looks so fucking rough compared to what ice looks like now. That was like the first thing I noticed. Everyone's like rolling around on the ice in that first game. And I was like, oh shit, the ice would never look like that now. Way harder to skate on. It was kind of interesting because I had never thought about that before.
Yeah, ice technology has come like so far. I remember for a long time, the previous arena in Edmonton was like famous for having the best ice. We were really proud of that, and we would brag about it all the time. I don't know if that's the case anymore in our new overpriced city-funded arena that we're
That's where the NHL games are happening right now, aren't they?
They're playing everywhere again now. But
now?
Yeah, when they did the previous season, it was all here, which was weird, like sitting at my house watching like a playoff final between two American teams and just being like, that's like 20 blocks away from me, but it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Reggie Dunlop is the coach, and he's like the heart of the team. Let's just talk about him because he's really the heart of this movie. I love Paul Newman so much. In this role, like, he really is just like a lovable scamp. Like, I don't think he's a bad guy. He's kind of scheming. The whole movie is him scheming because, he's trying to get the team purchased somehow. So he's like spreading rumors about like a fictitious purchase in Florida that's going to happen. And like trying to hype up the boys and stuff like that. And you're kind of like, a lot of that works because you're seeing Paul Newman like sort of react to everything that's going on, but it's just really entertaining to watch his exploits as the movie goes on and how he interacts with the other players, kind of like, pulling one over on them. But
yeah, sometimes he confused me a little bit. I was there were moments where I was like, what is this guy doing? But like you said, lovable scamp, I think, is the perfect way to describe him. He's kind of a piece of shit, but like he's a little bit harmless. But he's not pretending to be anything he isn't. Like, he's just like, yeah, come on, that's how it is. He doesn't give a fuck. I really like him. He's so charismatic. I'm also a huge Paul Newman fan. Like the first half of the movie, I was a little bit disengaged, but like I could also watch Paul Newman just like sit there for an hour and I'd be fine. He'd still be interesting to watch.
There's a scene fairly late in the movie where he gets punched in the face by Ned Braden, one of the other players, and he's like sort of laid out on the inside the bench, bleeding, but he just has this like grin on his face because he realizes what he did. And that's kind of like Paul Newman's face throughout this movie, is he just kind of has this like this excited grin of like a plan of his is maybe working, or he's pulling it off.
Yeah, he doesn't really he really doesn't have it together, this guy. He's in kind of a rough place, a place of transition in his life, shall we say.
Yeah, like he kind of maybe doesn't even realize it at first. Like the first chunk of the movie is him sort of dawning onto it. So he connects with his wife, his estranged wife, and she basically is explaining the situation to him where like she's like, the team is going to fold and you're old, so you can't play hockey anymore, and you're a coach and you're a losing coach. And what are you going to do? And he's like, no, it's going to be fine. And then, just like, maybe not. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that sort of theme of out with the old, in with the new in this movie, which is, it's done in a way that it's funny and entertaining, but there are a few moments that are just really brutal and heartbreaking. Whether it's between Paul Newman and his wife, soon to be ex-wife, Reggie, I should say. And or the older guys on the team once Reggie starts scheming, they're constantly giving each other little looks like, oh, Jesus, like, come on, these new guys, these Hanson brothers, and we gotta keep up with these little kids now. Like, I'm too old for this shit.
Yeah, it's interesting because like some of the team kind of knows he's full of shit, and they're just like,
yeah,
come on, buddy. But others are totally going along with it. Yeah, his relationship with his wife is kind of interesting because I think like I actually find that whole relationship very sweet, and it would be. If you just describe it, it can sound very bad because the movie is sort of him like relentlessly pursuing her. Like he makes excuses to bump into her in the street. And like when they're on the road, he's like calling her and he sees her in a bar and he like follows her outside. And, it's kind of a little bit obsessive. But maybe through the sheer power of it being Paul Newman, it just comes across as kind of nice. But I think they really do, he clearly loves her. He knows that he wasn't there enough for her. Like, I think one of the themes in this movie is his relationship with his wife and Ned Braden and Lily Braden, the younger star. And he's like, kind of like, he's at a point in his life where he just sort of like fucked everything up with hockey and he was not a good husband and his wife has left him and he's trying like, with no success to win her back. And he sort of deals with that, I think, by like trying to manage their relationship at the same time.
In very strange ways. There were several scenes where I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what is he trying to do? I couldn't, it was a very confusing dynamic, like between Reggie, Braden and Lily. There were like, I still am not entirely sure I understand what that dynamic was or what in particular Reggie was trying to do. But even I don't fully understand what Braden's issue was. It was a little bit vague at times. And at first I was pissed because I was like, oh, here we go. A nagging wife in a sports movie. Of course. But she turned out to be pretty badass. The way she drove that van also was spectacular. I really liked those shots of the van just like flying over the hill. And she's just fucking pissed. So I liked Lily.
Yeah, I think that is maybe one of the weakest parts of the movie. I like it. I like those characters and I like what is going on there, but I don't think it's communicated very well or it's tough to understand. Yeah. I say that because I've seen this movie a bunch of times and I was like always a bit confused as to like what her deal was and what his deal was and what Reggie was doing with her and where that was going. And I think like having watched it enough times, I've sort of like pieced it all together through some of like the other context. Right. So Ned Braden is a Princeton graduate. So he's a smart guy, and that's kind of his character. He's a smart guy.
Stick up his butt.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go along with the wrestling hockey. He's not going to goon it up. And Lily says she comes from a rich family. I'm going to guess they met in college or something like that. And she's kind of, because she's hitched to him, she's now stuck in this like small town that she just doesn't like at all. And they're not communicating well. And she's like, she does come across as really like, I can understand why she's unhappy, but she's just sort of like really not nice about it and really snobby.
She's a bitch. She's a full bitch at the beginning.
Yeah, she's, like they get in a fight at the bar and she's like, you and I are the only decent looking items in this town, And it's like, geez, like get over yourself. But throughout the movie, like, so what I think Reggie is doing is like, you're seeing Reggie interact with his estranged wife and she's telling him like, too little too late. Like she didn't want to be a hockey wife. It sucked.
Right.
And he's saying like, I would have called you, but we're busy and blah, blah, blah. And I think he knows that. And he's just seeing it play out again with like his young star player. So from Reggie's perspective, there is a bit of like, he's doing it out of self-interest. Like he wants his young star player to be happy. But I really think he's like trying to like help them out. So he's giving Ned a lot of advice. Like before they go on the road, she gives him a book and she's like, I underlined all the fuck scenes. And he's like, she underlined all the fuck scenes for you. And then he says, like, look, Ned, you need to learn to put out a bit more. Like, you need to kind of like be there for her. And then he's trying to like buddy up with her, and he's not trying to like hook up with her or anything like that, but he's like he's trying to form a connection with her and like cheer her up basically. But it eventually gets to the point towards the end of the movie where he's like, you should just leave him, that's what you need to do. Now I don't know if that was like to give Ned a bit of a wake up call or to give her, empower her. I think it was a bit of both, really. Like, she has a drinking problem.
Right.
And he's kind of like, you got to stop fucking your life up and, dump him if you have to.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting when he takes her to Francine's salon, or the salon Francine works at. And Lily tells Francine, oh yeah, Reggie said that you really, I can't remember the words. It was basically you really glowed up after the two of you split. And that's when Lily gets made over and she shows up at the hockey game and Braden's like, wah, wah, wee, wah. Let me take all my clothes off. So maybe Reggie's smarter than we all thought after all.
Well, yeah, like that actually I thought was, I never noticed that line until I watched it this time, but I thought that was a moment of sweetness again between Reggie and Francine, because I think the line is like, Reggie said, you've been terrific since you split up. And I don't think he meant it like you got hot. I think he meant it like,
no,
you're like doing better, like you're happier, your life is better. And to, he said that to Lily to kind of like convince her, like, this is the right thing for you to do. But it's also like, that's a hard thing for a person to admit, that like, this woman I love is better off without me. And, you should do that too. And Francine is kind of like taken aback when she hears that. Yeah. And then like, I do get a little bit confused, I guess, at where Lily's head is at right at the very end, and like how that all plays out. I think that doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me. Like she leaves Ned and she's like, I'm getting my life back together. I'm figuring it out. And then Reggie introduces her to Francine and they do the glow up. And like, that was kind of like, I think like their relationship, they just immediately seem to like have a connection and something in common. And you're like, oh, that's good. Like, that's really nice that they met and they're going to be friends. And then they like get dolled up and go to the game. But then at that point, she's like changed. Like, she's like, all of a sudden she's like, I love this. This is great. Like, I'm really supportive. And I just like totally didn't understand that. Like, maybe I don't know if like,
never underestimate the power of a makeover, Jason.
Of getting dolled up.
It was weird. It was a very abrupt shift. I didn't fully understand that character to start with, and then seeing that shift happen was a bit confusing. And he was just, I don't know, maybe he was like, oh, she's trying to impress me. She's putting the effort in. Maybe I'll put the effort in. I mean, they are sort of hanging out in the back of the car on the final scene, like, JFK and Jackie O. Maybe she's finally got the somebody's recognizing that she's better than the peasants, in this small town, these plebs, and she's just finally living her best life, hockey wife style.
Yeah, like I don't know, maybe she ran away and he sees her again and she's looking hot and he's like, this is, what am I doing? I've been a fool. And he kind of decides like, forget it. I'm tired of having a stick up my ass. I'm going to go take my clothes off.
Striptease on ice.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that is like probably, I want to say a weak part of the movie. I do like those characters and I like the overall kind of thing that's going on there, but something about the way it's executed just makes it hard to follow. The fact that it took me like multiple viewings to like kind of piece together what I think is going on is not great.
Yeah, I think also the 70s had like the highest divorce rate by the end of that decade, like ever in history. So I think it's like in America. So I think it's kind of interesting that they really did focus. Like, I don't remember a lot from my first viewing of this, but I don't remember these relationships at all. And I think it's pretty interesting that they examined that. Like, you know, women do talk about what it is like to be like a hockey wife, and it is not easy. And sort of with divorce becoming more normalized at that time, I think it's an interesting choice. And I wonder how much that played into them actually kind of focusing on those things in this story. I don't know.
Based on like it being, you know, based on the writings, so I guess the actual player. So the actual player that Nancy Dowd, her brother, that provided all this stuff, was the guy who played Ogie Oglethorpe at the end.
Right.
So that's the actual Ned Braden dude. But but it does come from those experiences. So I actually, you know, buy this as being like probably a fairly accurate depiction of like being a hockey wife and how boring it seems, like when they're all in that car talking and they're like, yeah, I don't drink until the afternoon.
Susie Kurtz. I didn't know she was in this. That was exciting to see her. Yeah, I think it's probably very lonely and difficult to, you know, look, I don't want to perpetuate stereotypes, but a lot of sports players, they have a reputation. They're on the road. They're away from their wives. There's women throwing themselves at them. There's a certain lifestyle that we obviously see in this movie, and a sort of brotherhood and maybe some not so honorable behavior is encouraged and celebrated. So yeah, I think it would be really, I don't want to overgeneralize, but yeah, I think it's mostly a pretty lonely life, honestly.
The flip side of that is hanging with the boys as a player, which, like, this movie feels very authentic in its depiction of a bunch of dudes who play sports together hanging out. I've never played like professional sports. I played hockey as an adult. I was terrible at it. But like locker room talk, that is that is accurate. And like just like there's one guy in this movie, Maurice Moe. He is like the perverted guy. He's just like constantly talking about women. And I like this character because I don't like the actual guy. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
But I like it because it is so accurate to like dudes I know. I've met guys that are just like, they just want to talk about women in the most like disgusting terms, sexual terms. They want to tell you in detail the stories of their exploits. There's a scene where they're all in a hotel room hanging out. They're watching TV, you know, shooting the shit. And he's walking around to like different people telling the same story. Like he'll tell one part to the next person. They just like kind of brush him away. And then he goes to someone else, you know, Reggie's on the phone and he's like talking in his ear about like some woman. I like that kind of stuff. All the stuff with like the guys playing hockey and interacting with each other just feels incredibly authentic.
Yeah. And I didn't know this, but a lot of these actors are actually just hockey players. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's why it seems pretty authentic.
Yeah, the Hansons are, there were three brothers that they had cast for this. One of them, I think something happened. He got hurt or he got called. He had to go play in the league somewhere or something like that. So they got a different hockey player to play one of those brothers. So they weren't actors. And I guess like when they started shooting it, they were like giving them lines and like, you know, have them act the scene, and it was like terrible. It just wasn't working. So then they were like, I don't know, just fuck around and see what happens. And so they did a lot of like improvisation and, you know, just kind of like rolled with it. And I think that totally works. I love the Hanson brothers. They're like famous characters in hockey culture, for good reason. None of that stinking root beer.
They're great. I think that's mostly what I remember from the movie were the Hansons. They're great. So fucking weird and funny. And were they okay, cut this out if this doesn't make sense.
Were they the inspiration for Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys?
When you started that sentence, I was like, I wonder if that's where you're going to go with it. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't have a deep knowledge of Trailer Park Boys. I've seen a little bit of it. I think Bubbles, maybe the glasses, like that's really the thing that stands out. Might have been inspired by that. I mean, I'm sure the people who made that show have seen Slapshot a bunch of times, so there could be some lineage there, or inspiration.
Yeah.
So the team kind of changes their direction. So like Reggie's trying to, gin up this rumor that they're gonna go to Florida. Someone's gonna buy the team. He's like convincing everybody it's gonna happen. He's scheming. He's scheming with that reporter character, who I love. He's always like trying to capture the spirit of the thing, which is what we try and do on the show. I'm trying to capture the spirit of Slapshot. A lot of the movie is like them on tour. Or on a road trip, basically going from town to town, and they just kind of get more progressively violent with their hockey and starting fights and stuff like that. And like this is like the I don't know, the most hockey part of the movie, I guess, is all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's one. This is like fairly later on in this, but like they're just going so hard, and I don't know who it was, which character, but he takes a shot and it's a slap shot. And it just, like, everything's crazy at this point. Like, the fans are loving it. His plan is kind of working. And this puck flies into the organ player's head. And I was like, Jesus. And it reminded me of a little anecdote. One time my grandfather was sitting in, like, one of the first rows, like, behind the glass at an Oilers game. And a puck went over the glass and straight into my grandfather's face and knocked his teeth out.
Ooh.
So he had to have them replaced. And then my grandpa like accidentally smacked himself in the mouth with a farm gate when he was tending to his cattle. So, but hey, he's going to be 92 next week, and he's still doing fine. But it just, that was real, too. That was a real moment for me.
When he knocked the teeth the second time, was it the same teeth? Did he knock out the same teeth?
It was the same. It was like his fake teeth. His new fake teeth that got knocked out.
Oh, no. Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, that's another area where things have changed a lot in hockey for the better, which is like they added netting all over the place. There was an incident in the early 2000s where, unfortunately, a puck went to the crowd and hit a kid, and the kid died. So they took some pretty quick action to change that. They've also, like, the glass is higher everywhere.
Right.
Most of this stuff is good, but it is kind of like, I do feel a little bit sad watching like 80s hockey and seeing like the lack of advertising. But just, like the glass was lower. Like you kind of were closer to the action back then. There's a scene in this movie where someone throws keys at one of the Hanson brothers, and then like things go crazy and they charge into the crowd and start beating the guy up. And I was like, oh, that's based on this incident that happened in the NHL where a Boston player went into the crowd and like beat this guy up and actually beat him with his own shoe.
Oh my God.
It's very funny. But then I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that happened after this movie came out.
This movie, that guy was just waiting for someone to pull some shit so he could pull a Hanson.
Be like, oh, that would be awesome if I could do that.
I fucking love that scene when he's just like swinging at people because his glasses fly off, and they're like, no, not that guy.
Yeah.
Not that guy either.
Beating up the wrong guy.
Yeah, that was funny.
But yeah, this whole like, road trip section of the movie, I like it just because it's really fun. It just like, it looks like they're all having fun. They're in the hotel room. They're playing guitar and dancing around and singing and stuff like that.
Beating up the bus. I love that scene too.
Making it look mean.
Yeah.
Did you notice the bus driver dressed like a Nazi in one scene?
I did not notice. I saw that in your notes and I was like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
I did not.
It's after that scene. There's a shot where they're all getting on the bus and the bus driver is standing there and he's like wearing like basically a biker outfit with like a kind of biker helmet, but it's got a big swastika on it and an SS on the side.
What?
I was really confused by that, so I had to Google it, and I was not the first person to ask this, but I think like people basically said like, yeah, they were really trying to like look like tough guys, so that was what he did to do that. And I guess like in the 70s, maybe you could do stuff like that, but like that really doesn't play today.
No. Interesting. I'm like wondering if they took that out of the movie because I did not notice it.
Where did you watch this? Did you stream it?
I watched it on Apple TV.
Have the Blu-ray. It was in my...
It was like on Stars or something. One of the channels on Apple TV.
During the section, they also play that song, that disco song I sang at the beginning over and over again. I thought that song came up like 20 times in the movie. If you asked me beforehand, like, how often do they play that song? What's your guess on how many times they play that song?
At very least 7. That's lowballing it.
I counted 4.
What?
I know, right? Somehow it feels like more.
It feels like there were 2 songs in this. Right back where we started from and little bit south of Saskatoon. One is a disco song. The other is a full country song. This is a weird audio choice. Were there any other songs in this movie? Because it seemed like these were the only 2.
The national anthem.
Yeah, we get that a few times.
They were in a bar at one point and there was some music playing. I think there's like another song or 2 that might show up briefly, but like these ones just show up multiple times throughout.
Wow, that's wild. I would have definitely thought more than 4.
Yeah, strange how that works because I was predicting like 8 or 9.
Yeah. It was a good song, so at least it's
a great
fun.
song. It's just got like constant clapping throughout it, which is like weird. I think that's why I like it so much, is just like, you know, they're driving on the bus and like having fun and just like clapping along. Yeah, very bouncy.
I know the first time it came up was the first scene in the bar where, I don't know, they're trying to convince us Paul Newman's not one of the most stunning human beings to ever walk planet Earth. And he's like, Denis like, oh yeah, you couldn't get with that woman when he's approaching his wife. Because I was watching that scene when you sent me a message saying, I sure hope you like disco music.
Sure hope you like one disco song in particular.
Yeah.
So they do the road trip and they start getting a winning record. Things are going pretty good. People are really believing in this rumor thing. Meanwhile, Reggie is like trying to figure out who owned the chief. Owns. He eventually like bullies Joe the manager into telling him by reminding him he knows a story about him. He walked in on him cross-dressing a long time ago. That's a little cold, Reggie. But
there's like, I get it that like there's a lot of homophobic rhetoric in sports, especially, you know, many years ago. It's changing now, but this movie really goes hard on it. To the point where I was actually quite shocked, and I would not have been surprised if like Brayden would have revealed that he's actually gay at the end of the movie, or you know what I mean? Like I was like, what are they saying? They weren't really saying too much other than just this is how it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I don't know if there's any kind of message behind it.
Yeah,
I was wondering like, okay, so there is the scene where Reggie is with Hanrahan's ex-wife Susanna, and she's telling the story about how like she's like I'm sleeping with women now, and like was that kind of like progressive taboo at the time?
Yeah, like Reggie's interesting because he's clearly not like hateful towards her or even to the manager. He's just being shitty and using it as an excuse to like get information out of him.
It was leverage.
It's just
he had leverage.
Yeah, but it just comes up so often. So I'm like, maybe it is a little progressive because he's just like, oh, you don't say. I don't blame you. Women are beautiful. I see dicks all day. Yuck.
And so like, maybe when I'm older, I'll start sleeping with old goalies.
Yeah.
I think that the one time where it actually is like kind of like whoa is when he goes and he finds out who owns the team, and it's a woman who is wealthy and her husband is in doggy heaven, which I guess means he's dead.
Yeah, that was weird.
And so he's like trying to convince her like, hey, you know, like our numbers are up, like you could sell us. And she's like, yeah, maybe I could. But because of financial reasons, it's actually better for me to let the team fold and then I get a big tax write-off. Whereas if I sell it, I'll make like some small profit, which is like horrible, but kind of like the reality of how things like this work. So that's, it's a bummer of a moment. And he's pissed and he's like, you're fucked. You're garbage for letting us go down the drain. And we're human beings. And like, he's right. But then, like, as he's leaving, he basically, says some really bad stuff about her son, potentially being gay in the future if she doesn't get a man in the house, using some salty language. That was the one part where I was like, oh boy, that definitely would not fly today.
Yeah, like straight up, not a lot of this holds up in terms of would this movie be made today and how would it look? It would look so different. It would be a completely different movie.
Certainly in the NHL, definitely they have a pretty like strict kind of culture and policy on this kind of stuff. Like I know the league has been like making a push for years to be like, guys, you can't keep using that word. It's not good.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that long ago, a couple years ago maybe, where there were some young players, like rookie players who were like sharing text messages, or they were in a text group chat and they were being incredibly disrespectful to women and speaking to each other like this. And they caught a lot of heat. And I actually think the guy was let go from that team.
Yeah, the culture is much different today. So this movie is a throwback in many ways.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. They're kind of boned. The team is going to fold. Reggie kind of fesses up to everybody and he's like, yeah, I made that shit up. Sorry, guys. And they're like, we're going to win it clean and fair and square. And he gets Ned back and he's like, Ned, come play one last game. You don't have to dick around. And so they go out and like basically just get their asses kicked for, 1 or 2 periods.
By this absurd lineup. I love this scene where they're just announcing these guys onto the ice. And it's Tim Dr. Hook McCracken. That character kills me with just like scar down his face. Just nasty looking guy. We finally meet Augie Oglenthorpe. I can't even remember. He's sort of alluded to through the whole movie. And then the most racist moment is in the movie, Screaming Buffalo. Oh my God. This is a bad call.
Maybe he's indigenous. We don't know. I didn't do the research. It's possible.
Oh boy. He's like doing like war cries and going after guys, and he like calling the other team little scalpies or something like that. Like really just like they go full on with this like indigenous racism moment. It just like, I tense up. I just like cringe when I see it now. I'm like, oh my God, why did we let this happen?
It also doesn't make sense that like this is the last game of the playoffs. This is the championship game. And then they're like, and we brought in a bunch of retired players, which is like, that's usually not how sports work. Like maybe minor leagues have different rules, but there tends to be a lot of rules about like who is allowed to be on the team at a certain point. And I don't think you can just call in these people at the last minute.
And a bunch of these players were like forbidden to play ever again.
Yeah. Or like we're in jail.
Yeah.
So they get their asses kicked and then Joe comes in and I love his line delivery when he's just like, you're losing. People expected a show and blah, blah, blah. And then he just says like, you're a bunch of pussies. Just the way he spits that word out fucking cracks me up so much. And then and then they show Reggie Dunlop and he's like, scouts? And then just like smash cut to violence.
This scene confused me. I mean, I guess for the drama and for the story's purposes, I buy entirely that none of them knew, including the coach, that any scouts were going to be there. Is it not sort of typical for the team to be given a heads up like, hey guys, scouts are going to be here today. Fucking do good. No, nobody knew except for Joe.
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure how that information is communicated, or if there's scouts that like maybe don't want people to know that they're there and that sort of thing. I think what I found unbelievable about it is like, why would the scouts show up just at the very last game of the season. Like, that's a weird game for like, the scouts have arrived, you know. Usually they're just kind of like showing up all over the place. You want to see some like mid-season game to see where people are at. but it works for the context of the movie.
This game is nutso. I loved it. I love the team's just getting the shit kicked out of them, and Reggie's just there going like, old time hockey, teamwork. It's absurd. And the players, the one killer, is that the guy who was like,
Dave's a killer. Dave's a mess.
Coach, call me killer. And he's like, I'm one with the universe. Nothing matters. And I was like, this is a very relatable moment. That is me every fucking day trying to get through my work day. Just like, I'm at one with the universe. Nothing matters. Meanwhile, like, just absolute chaos. This is I love the scene. This was like, I wanted more of this, less of like Paul Newman trying to get a hold of his soon-to-be ex-wife.
Yeah, I like Dave. He's a fun character. Yeah, he's into like the self-help books. He's like, you know, kind of a sweet young kid who's like, yeah, call me killer. He
had like a weird Dracula cape on.
Yeah, which he like sheepishly takes off when he says like, we're not going to do that anymore. And you're like, aw, poor guy. Yeah. I like actually early in the movie when he's like the first game he's benched, or he's not benched, but he's like he's on the injured reserve and he's talking to the radio guy and he's like, oh, you injured yourself? And he's like, no, I caught a cold. You know, I went outside without a jacket. And I think it's settling down in my kidneys.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great scene. Also, there was a moment where they were back in the locker room and Denis was freaking out. And you can hear somebody freaking out in French, but nobody's mouth is moving. There was just no attempt at covering that up. But it was funny.
Editing disaster. Apparently this movie is very popular in Quebec because they did a French dub in French-Canadian Quebec, which one confuses or makes me, I want to see how that movie plays out, because a big part of this movie is the fact that there's like two players that are French-Canadian. So like they're sometimes speaking French and they got the accent and people are like translating things for them. Like, how does that work when everybody's speaking the same language in the movie? How do they communicate that some of those players are English and some are French? That's not important. But it does have like the French-Canadian like dialect. And so I watched just a clip just to see what it looks like. And my French is not great. Like my half my family is French. I used to speak it when I was young. I don't really anymore. So I was like, couldn't really understand it, but I could definitely pick out the profanity. And I was like, oh yeah, that is French-Canadian. Lots of tabarnaks and call-lists and all that.
There's a really noticeable tabernacle right at the beginning of the movie, like one of the first scenes, which made me laugh out loud, because there is so much Canadian culture in this film, even though it takes place, like you said, in the States. It's so present.
One of my favorite lines is at the beginning when they're at the fashion show and the woman is like introducing the guy, and she's like, a defense man, which is like a nice like detail, and from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Yeah. Which is how I've said that name for 15 years now.
The fashion show also includes a line, ensemble number 32 entitled Omar Sharif, which killed me. That sent me over the edge. Oh, those tiny details are so good.
Over my head. Yeah. Like I think that this movie, like why it works so much for me is like the lines, it just has a lot of like little funny lines that are delivered in a funny way by funny characters. So it's just like really just kind of fun to watch all that stuff play out.
Yeah. I mean, even in the first part where it's a little bit boring, you do feel like you're just hanging out with some kind of chill guys that aren't that bad to hang out with.
I'm going to flash him.
Maurice.
I'm going to whip it out. I like that dude a lot. That character, Johnny, with his like handlebar mustache. He's fun.
Yeah.
Fucking Chrysler plant. Here I come.
That guy reminded me of like guys that would be around the house when I was a kid, like my dad's friends. Felt like a very comfortable person.
So the gang is all beating the shit out of each other on the ice. Actually, this is an earlier scene. I just wanted to reference another funny line. There's a game where they start getting into fights in the warm-ups before the game has even started. So they're like all beating each other up, and then it cuts to the national anthem, and they're all just like standing there, and the ref, who's like really short compared to the Hanson brothers, is just like visibly vibrating with anger. And then he skates up to the Hanson brother, and he's like, just starts lecturing him about like, I don't want this, or I don't want you pulling any shit. And then the Hanson guy goes, I'm trying to listen to the fucking song.
That scene was so weird. I was like, this ref, that seems very unprofessional for that ref to interrupt the national anthem to give this guy shit.
He was so angry, though.
It was a good scene.
Driven to madness by the Hanson brothers. And then at the end, they're all beating each other up. Ned does his striptease. He realizes he loves his wife, so he takes his clothes off. I like multiple times throughout that scene, they just show this like old lady in the crowd, and she's just like really enjoying it, really having a good time.
Sipping her soda.
She's got like those opera glasses at one point, the binoculars. Yeah. And then the ref, McCracken? Is it McCracken? Yeah, he like punches the ref, and then he's like, "You're out." And then he goes to Reggie Dunlop, and he's like, "Come on, dummy, you won the game. Come get your trophy." It's just like so unceremonious. There you go, you bum.
Yeah.
And then that's basically it. There's a parade the next day, and everyone's happy.
And then fucking Francine, who, look, I like Francine, but she couldn't wait fucking 15 minutes for this parade to go by. She's got to pull her little dinky trailer behind her car through the parade.
I think that was Reggie's fault. I think Reggie he stops the parade and like flags her through because he sees her car. So I think that's on him.
I mean, look, Francine doesn't strike me as a dummy. This is a small town. She doesn't know there's a parade through the middle of town. Also, she comes up one street and then turns around on the other. She couldn't have turned around and just gone down a different route.
Yeah.
Look, I get it. It's a movie. But I was like a little annoyed with Francine.
You're going to make one of those videos that are like all the problems with Slapshot.
I'll make a little chart of the ways Francine could have backed up, turned around.
You got a corkboard with some like pins and red twine, like a map.
It'll be like Pee-wee's Big Adventure in his basement meeting. I'll pull out props. Yeah, it was kind of weird. This was a really heartbreaking scene. Like, it's supposed to be really celebratory and fun, and it is in a lot of ways. But this is really like a goodbye between them, even though they're not saying goodbye. And that fucking last shot when the credits start rolling of her trailer just getting further and further and further away down the road. It was brutal. I mean, this movie was like a roller coaster of emotions for me. It was all over the place. It's interesting how, and I don't think they do this as well anymore in film. I think this is something they did really well in the 70s, is incorporate a lot of humor into drama, or a lot of like actual real feelings and a bit of drama in real human emotion into a comedy like this, because that was actually quite a touching scene, I thought.
Yeah, it's it's kind of it is sad. Like it's he's playing it cool and funny, and he's got his head in her window, and he's like, yeah, I'm got a new job and it's gonna go great, and come on with me and it'll be awesome. And she's like, just like, no, it's not gonna happen. He's okay, well, call me and blah blah blah. Yeah, I think like that's kind of their relationship. Like that, I think there's just so much heart there. That it really does bring a lot to the movie. The sort of like sweetness and affection between them for each other, even though it's not going to work, is nice. Yeah,
it's sweet. And look, Newman's eyes. He can say one thing, but those eyes tell another story, baby. It was a great scene.
Yeah, he is. He was a dreamy man.
Mm-hmm. And look, little plug for Paul Newman's salsa and Paul Newman's salad dressings.
I knew he did the salad dressing. I didn't know he did salsa.
His salsa is the best salsa on the market. Just trust me, you're gonna love it.
All right, I'll pour one out for Paul Newman. I'll buy some salsa. Just dump it on my street. All right. Well, that is Slapshot. I love this movie. I love it a lot. It's not perfect in some ways. You know, the passage of time and the changing of you know, politics and how we talk and stuff like that aside. The only real, I guess, knock I have against it is I do think that the Lily Ned stuff is just a little bit of a mess. It's a little hard to understand, and that could have been executed a little better. But other than that, it's just got so many funny lines. It's so quotable. I just love watching all the characters kind of like interact with each other. And it's, I don't know, it's a feel good movie. I always feel good and happy watching it. And it's a good 70s movie. Like, it really, it's, you know, we watched Zodiac recently, and I said, like, Zodiac is a good movie set in the 70s. But you know, it's completely different. Like, this is a movie that was made in the 70s, so it's very authentic. And you know, it's not just people putting on 70s clothes. It's like, nah, dog, that's how Paul Newman dressed at the time. You know, he wore those plaid pants and that all leather, like that all brown leather, you know, he's got the pants and the jacket. Just like, yes. It looks ridiculous, but like, it also looks good. Because I think we had a little bit of a resurgence of that, you know, maybe like 10 years ago or so, like some of that 70s fashion came back. And we're due for that again. I want to bust up my orange leather jacket.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a great movie. I think the radio announcer in that last scene sort of sums it up for me. Everyone on their feet screaming, kill, kill, kill. This is hockey. I feel like I just like get ramped up like watching this movie. Like I said, it's like very comforting for me in a way. I think it's like, it just brings back a lot of good memories from my youth, I guess. I agree with you. The Ned and Lily stuff was a bit clunky. The first half's a bit slow, but get through it. If you haven't seen this movie, get through it because it's worth the payoff, I think. I enjoyed it. And look, you're going to hear a lot of disco and a little bit of country. Why not?
All right, well, that is Slapshot. I'm going to give this movie 9.5 Paul Newman brown leather jackets with fur collars out of 10.
9.5.
I love this movie.
I like this movie. I'm going to give this movie, for a sports movie, I'm going to give this movie an 8 small town community arena cheeseburgers out of 10.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for this week's episode of Ex Post Watcho. Thank you very much for listening to it. We'll be back next week. If you would like to reach out to us to recommend a movie, or if you have any thoughts about anything we've said, you can email us at expostwatcho@gmail.com. We are on Facebook and Instagram at expostwatcho. If you could take a minute and on your favorite podcasting application of choice, leave a review. That would be nice. Lets people know about the show. We'll be back next week as we travel to the future, the world of Gattaca. Until then,